Hello and welcome to the Johnson Leadership Series. I'm your host, Jason Johnson, founder and managing partner of executive search firm Johnson. Today we're joined by Rob Coombe, a prominent director who has recently led the successful turnaround and sale of the craveable brands business to Tibra Capital. Rob's been a very successful director, the chairman of a number of significant organisations, and built his career with 30 years in financial services, culminating in being the CEO of BT Financial Group and then the CEO of the Retail and Business Banking Division of Westpac. So today we're going to have the privilege of getting the secret sauce behind the success of the turnaround at Craveable Brands. Hi Rob.
Hey Jace, how are you?
Really well, thanks.
Yeah.
Rob, today I'd like to focus predominantly on the tremendous success and recent sale of the Craveable Brands business.
Yes.
But before we dive into that, I might share a little bit of your background.
Mm-hmm.
Rob, you're a very successful director nowadays,
Mm-hmm.
the chairman of a number of significant organisations, including a Generation Development Group, Tibra Capital, and on a number of other boards, including CIMB, Ascalon, and Australian Surfing.
Yeah, that's the best one.
A busy portfolio, indeed, which shows a bit of your individual passion for surfing as well.
Yeah.
You had a tremendous career in financial services, in fact 30 years as I understand it, starting out as a lawyer and moving through to lead ultimately the BT Financial Group and subsequently the Retail and Business Banking Division of Westpac.
Yes, yeah.
In 2012, you made a very courageous decision to step out into the quick service restaurants business. What drove that decision?
I never felt that I was defined around the industry I was in. I was always curious about how other businesses worked, and I really wanted the challenge of testing the skills I'd learnt in 30 years in another industry. That was firstly, but secondly, I feel very strongly it's not the industry you're in, it's who you work with that gives you the most enjoyment. And I was asked by Gordon Cairns at the time to come over and run it. It was an asset that had difficulties, and Gordon I'd worked with at Westpac, and I just really like working with Gordon. He's a kind of very values-driven leader. We're very similar in that respect. Doesn't mean we always get on. We've had many arguments over the years, but he's just the kind of guy that gets the best out of me. So that together with private equity and the Archer guys who I'd also worked with before as well was like a match made in heaven for me from a values perspective.
Fantastic. Well, you joined a business that housed three iconic brands.
Yes.
Red Rooster, Porto and Chicken Treats.
Yeah.
About 12,000 employees across 600 stores.
Yes, that's
serving
right.
about 150,000 customers a day.
Yeah, that's it.
When you arrived, I understand that some of the trajectory of that business wasn't positive.
Yes.
Can you talk to us about what you found on arrival?
Yes, well, I mean, the business had 4 CEOs in 2 years, so you can imagine things weren't synchronised that well at that point in time. The business was challenged. I mean, sales were heading south, margins were heading south, stores were closing, franchisees were up in arms, employee engagement in the business wasn't particularly strong, and obviously with all those things put together, there was a shareholder that was pretty anxious as well. I mean, private equity assets are also quite leveraged. So when things are not going well, it does put an impetus in there to get moving and get those metrics turned around the right way. So very challenging environment. Jason, also a very competitive and tough industry as well. So you kind of overlaid that with the challenge, and it was quite a task ahead.
I understand you believe in 100-day plans.
Yes.
What were some of the elements of your 100-day plan for Craveable Brands?
So firstly, the 100-day plan, I know it's a bit of a cliche, but it's very important, I believe, because a new CEO coming into a business almost has the permission to actually get a lot of stuff done. Like people are waiting, they're expecting. So, it's a waste not to take advantage of that environment. I did have a plan when I went in, and culminating in that, as you normally get in a 100-day plan, is a board-endorsed strategy to take the business forward and to get it turned around. I pretty quickly realised I had to throw my 100-day plan out when I started in there, because there was just so many things that needed to be attended to, and so many stakeholders, all who had legitimate issues and wanted to air their voice on what needed to be done. So, to be honest, Jason, I spent the first 100 days basically out on the road speaking to franchisees, employees, suppliers, other stakeholders out there. Even I chased down the original founders of these brands from 40 years ago to try and connect with them about what had originally made the brands great. With the view to, at the end of that, having enough information to then go away and start to put my thoughts together on how to turn that business around. So, yeah, I also put about 8 kilos on in that first 3 months, going around to all the stores, but that's a side thing. But yeah, look, being a new industry as well, Jason, I had a steep learning curve as well. So I'm glad I did that, because what I thought needed to be done and what I was told needed to be done actually wasn't what needed to be done. I came up with a very different answer. So I needed 100 days to put my 100-day plan together in this case.
And 6 years on, you've led a tremendously successful transformation. What were some of the key elements and most successful elements of that transformation? Yeah.
I had this, if any of my staff ever see this video, they'll have a chuckle. I called it a Transaround, because it was a transformation and a turnaround at the same time. It's like driving a car and trying to change the engine out. It's a very difficult thing to do, because we needed to get all those metrics that I mentioned before going the right way, which is the turnaround component. But our competitors in the Australian market, which is basically Macca's, Hungry Jack's, Domino's and KFC, they're master franchises of US parents. They are their best businesses in the world in Australia. So if you go to a McDonald's in Australia, it's the best in the world. So we had formidable competition and we were a long way behind. So the danger is, if you just turn it around, you're still 5 years behind the other guys. So you've got to turn it around and actually try and get ahead of them at the same time. So look, what was done, pretty simple. First thing was, if you're going to do great things, you need a great team. So we needed to rebuild the team there. The second thing was to develop a vision for the business on where you were going to take it. Particularly with a franchise business, it's very important, because you've got people there looking for direction. Without any direction, it's like herding cats. They're all off doing their own thing. So developing that. And then the third thing, I almost hate to use as a bit of a cliche, it's the old Jim Collins, on the bus, off the bus. But we had to really drive hard to that vision. And again, like in a franchise system, you will get some people that just won't do it for whatever reason. But we basically had to either get them on or get them out of the system. And there was a fair bit of that went on during that period of time.
And tell me, Rob, when you made the transition, did you reach out to any mentors or people that you know to help accelerate across that change?
Yes. Jason, it's really frightening when you change industries, because all your networks are gone. Like I built a career in financial services, knew everyone, didn't know anyone really, or didn't think I knew anyone in quick service restaurant industry. But when I kind of dived into my Rolodex, I realised that I had come across some pretty amazing people over the years. So a guy like Bob Mansfield, who basically set up Macca's in Australia at the beginning of his career as a young executive. A guy like Peter Bush, who did the big McDonald's turnaround that ultimately transformed McDonald's globally. I'd met Bushy quite a few times in the past. And obviously Gordon actually was a QSR executive at KFC many years ago. So all three of those guys were very generous with their time. I sought them out. I spent a lot of time with them. And unequivocally, they fast-tracked me by at least 12 months and also opened up their network. I mean, one of the challenges is when you come to a new industry, you don't really know who's good and who's not. You look at someone's CV and it looks good. I mean, I'm sure you get this all the time. Indeed. But it's actually good when there's people that know these individuals or can point you in the right direction towards people that they know are amazing. And all three of those guys helped me with talent and also mentoring. And, I'm eternally grateful for that. And I think Archer should be as well, because it got me out of the blocks a lot quicker than it would have otherwise been.
I understand you also introduced a number of innovations to
Yes.
the business. Can you speak to some of the more successful innovations?
Yeah, I think, it's almost ubiquitous now, but we were the first outside of pizza to do delivery. So we built the whole logistics around a delivery system, which is online ordering, a back of house management system around that. And then we had to rebuild the websites and then the drivers and build out cars and put up pylons on stores. And we rolled that out, and it really, really hit the mark. So we were the first to do that outside of Domino's as a system. And to get, for example, roast chicken meals delivered at home really resonated with the consumer. So that was a big piece of work. The second thing, and this is not overly innovative in many ways, but it was really important for each of the brands to have their unique identity. What had happened, and this is a trap that a lot of people fall into when they're running a multi-brand strategy. In the end, if you're not careful, all the brands can become the same, and then they lose their personality and they start cannibalising each other. It was very important that we develop this concept, which I actually picked up in Westpac, but it's more appropriate to the restaurant industry, called one kitchen, many dining rooms. So to get the back of house or the back of the business operating in a standard way, like finance, HR, IT, but to preserve what's unique about the individual brands, so branding, operation, menu, those types of things. So we cleaned that up as well. And then finally we did another first in Australia in the QSR industry, which is to roll out a loyalty scheme, which was all app-based. I know it sounds, everyone's got one now, but we were the first to do it. And again, that was extremely important. Like in banking, I knew all of our customers, we knew where they lived, how much they got paid. We had so much information, we didn't do that much with it. In QSR or in any retail business, you just don't have any information on your customers. So when you're marketing, it's kind of that spray and pray concept. But once you build up a database of who your customers are and where they're shopping and so on, you can be far more sophisticated and efficient in the way you market to your customers. So they're probably three things: delivery, building out the brand identities, and rolling out the loyalty schemes.
Having led through an incredible turnaround, what's the characteristics of talent that you need to help drive that scale of turnaround?
Yeah. So it's not, the type of person is not necessarily the person with the most buttoned-down CV, having worked for the biggest brands out there, because a lot of the time, not always, those people have had an incredible amount of support structure around them and may not have encountered a turnaround. So ideally, it's someone that's actually done it before and has had a track record, enjoys it. It's not always a lot of fun when you're doing it, and is incredibly resilient. They're the kind of things that I'd be looking for. I mean, if they've got experience, that's a positive as well, but the experience in the sector is not as important as the experience in having done the turnaround.
So Rob, you have had tremendous success leading a franchise network, while many others over the recent past have struggled. What are your learnings and reflections?
The one key learning here is that it's a symbiotic relationship based on trust. So you really, really both sides need to work together for a common goal. I think where these things go astray is where the franchisor, who generally has more power than the franchisee, abuses that power in their own self-interest. I spent as much time thinking about how the franchisee could make more money as I spent thinking about the shareholder. If you don't have that mindset, you could really, really screw your franchisees, and we've seen a fair bit of that happening.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Rob, you've had now several interactions, very successful interactions indeed, with private equity firms. What are your tips to other executives who are coming into a private equity-backed business?
The first thing I'd say is I really like the model because I like the owners sitting at the table. You can make decisions very quickly and dynamically. It's a very stimulating environment. I do it again any day of the week. I think the main thing is to be very clear on what the owners are trying to achieve and what time frame they're working at, and then to build out a plan to that. It's not to say you have to agree with everything that the private equity guys are pushing. Obviously, they've got strong financial acumen and really focus on optimising shareholder returns. That's a great thing. That's a given. But there's many different ways to getting an optimised shareholder return. So you need to educate a little bit disparaging, but you need to work the agenda up with them that there's many other inputs that come into a financial return than just the numbers. So you need to have engaged staff, you need to have a great customer value proposition, you need to manage your suppliers properly, all these kind of things that probably aren't high on the PE owner's agenda needs to get up there, and that will get you the right result at the end.
Financial services to quick service restaurants both have significant functions that look on the face of it quite similar. What are the nuances between, say, marketing in financial services and marketing in QSR?
Well, marketing in QSR has to be infinitely better than what it is in financial services. Financial services, you know your customers, you know where they live, you know a lot of stuff about them. So, you know, you're not waking up every day thinking, how do I win new customers? Because they're on the books and you're making money from them. When you're in QSR or in retail, you live or die by your daily sales. So marketing has to be relevant, it has to be directed, people have to be able to notice it and engage with it and act on it. Like, it has to be good, otherwise you don't survive, whereas whether you had a good marketing function or not in the bank didn't really matter.
Fantastic. And when you reflect back on the transformation, what would you have done differently with the benefit of hindsight?
Yeah, lots. The main one, Jason, and like I was in such a sense of urgency to get this thing moving, not only because it's PE owned asset, but I just felt a strong sense of obligation to everyone involved that we needed to get this thing turning the right way. I tried to do it too quickly before I had that team that I mentioned fully embedded in the business. And if you try and roll out a transformation or a turnaround with a suboptimal team, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. So before I built out the team, an example, there was 23 different POS systems throughout the brand. So I wanted there to be one POS system so you could get better reporting. You could make sure that all the cash was going into the system, and you could do things like roll out loyalty schemes and a number of other things. Anyway, before I even hired a head of IT, we rolled that out, and there were issues all over the place with that. It was the right system, but executed badly because I just didn't have the people that were able to do it. That's one example of that. So definitely, no matter how much of a rush you're in, you got to get your team in place before you get too aggressive on the transformation agenda. And
talking of teams, you'd had 30 years in financial services and then moved to quick service restaurants where the demographic is profoundly different,
yes.
Largely a millennial-based employee group. How did you find the difference in leadership approaches that you had to apply in quick service restaurants?
Couldn't be more different. Financial services, generally well paid. People go into that industry as a profession and as a long-term career, and generally got university qualifications, and they're motivated by compensation and bonuses and all of that. This is completely opposite. The average age in the stores is 16. Store managers 17. Most people aren't doing it as a career. They're doing it to earn a bit of money. So, you know, there's not a natural level of engagement or sophistication with that audience. But what I realised very quickly is the millennials, so to speak, are very, very keen to learn. And in many ways, like for many of them, this is the first job And I felt like this strong sense of really wanting to set them up for the future, and they were thirsty to learn. So providing you could deliver training, learning and development in a way that they could engage with, which is on mobile phones, you could really kind of capture their attention and really start to build out some talent there. And the second thing, maybe this is not surprising for those that know millennials, but they actually really love feedback. And they hadn't been given a lot of feedback. It was kind of set and forget culture. And, we started to make sure that the people that were doing the right things were recognised for that. I know it sounds pretty simple, but it goes a really long way, like a really long way with the millennials. The pat on the back, financial services, you've got to pay people a bonus before they feel good about it. But with the kids, you just had to thank them and pat them on the back. I ended up writing them cards, which sounds crazy because most of them never got anything in the post before. When I started this out at the end of every week, I'd write about 10 notes out to the network, and when I'd finished it 6 months later, well, not finished it, but 6 months later, I was writing 300 or 400 cards
Amazing.
out to the network. And then you go around the stores and visit them, and they've got the letters and the cards posted up. They were incredibly proud of being recognised. It's a simple thing and it doesn't cost anything.
I understand it worked. 50% engagement when you arrived and world record engagement when you transacted
Maybe
the
not
sale.
world record, but definitely better than 50%.
Great. So Rob, what are the top tips you'd have for someone changing industry?
Well, firstly, it's quite challenging, but it is exhilarating because you're on a steep learning curve. But my tips would be, firstly, seek out people that have built successful careers in that industry and get them to open up their network and to give you their tips as well. So there's nothing like that to fast track your development. The second thing is spend the time to immerse yourself in that industry. And I know it can be a bit of a cliche, but you need to immerse yourself with all stakeholders. So it's obviously your shareholders, it's the employees, it's going to be potentially unions, suppliers, customers. Just immerse yourself probably in that first 100 days to get a really good understanding of what the issues are ahead of you. And then finally, once you're on top of that, move quickly. A new CEO coming into a business has got the permission to move quickly, but don't pontificate on that too long. But as you're moving quickly, making sure that you've got the team that's going to be able to execute it, because nothing worse than moving quickly and it fizzing because you've got a poor team. So they're the tips really to making that change.
Congratulations. Last week, the management team, along with Archer Capital, transacted a sale to PAG Asia Capital.
Yes.
Can you talk through, I think last year, there was some discussion around IPO. You've ultimately culminated in a tremendously, on the face of it, successful sale to PAG. What was the thinking through that process?
Yeah, we felt when we set sail, the asset was definitely ready to be sold when we were looking to IPO it. It was at the end of generally the private equities holding period, which there's no fixed date, but it's generally 6 to 10 years in that zone. I think we were at the 6 or 7 year mark. Business was performing well, so we had a good management team in place. We felt we could tap into the public markets. But when you set sail on that process, it can take at least 6 months, and markets can change a lot in that period of time. So markets basically fell into a bit of a hole, and there was no IPOs basically put away over that period we were looking to do it, so we withdrew it from the market. Continued to run it for another couple of years, kept punching out the numbers, would have met our prospectus forecast if we had have listed it. And then were actually approached by PAG, who were interested in, they've got a big fund interested in QSR assets and really liked what we were doing. And from Archer's perspective, it was probably a better outcome anyway, because it's what's called a clean exit. Whereas an IPO is a little bit more complicated for a private equity firm. Yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah.
I understand a terrific outcome for both parties.
Yeah, no, it's good. And the team goes on with the new owner, so they are very happy with the talent in there and the momentum of the business. They're going to continue to invest in it and hopefully, continue on the momentum that we've built over the past 4 or 5 years.
And has this created some space on your dance card?
To do other QSR assets? I don't know about that.
What's next for you?
Look, I really, really like doing things that I can make a difference. Jason, I've had this conversation with you before. So I'm definitely open to transformations, turnarounds, or working with people that are doing those types of things. I think if you can change something for the better, it's one of the best things you can do as an executive. It's something you can be incredibly proud of. I'm never going to be the person that sits there and clips the ticket. I just couldn't live with myself. I want something to be a lot better at the end of my involvement with it than at the beginning. So they're the kind of things that I continue to pursue. Well,
Rob, again, congratulations on leading such great success. Thanks. And thanks for your contribution to the Johnson Leadership Series.
Thanks, Jason. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Good chatting.